Welcome back to the Femme Portfolio podcast, where we talk all things work, wealth, and wellness. I'm your host, Rachel Hirsch, and today we have the incredible privilege of having Julia Haber, CEO and co-founder of Home from College on. Julia, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. Will you tell us a little bit, like loose background before we really start to dig in?
For sure. So I'm originally from New York, and I definitely still have that type A energy, even though I live in LA.
Fast
But
walker.
I know, right? I started my first company actually while I was a freshman in college. It was an experiential marketing agency where we'd basically create IRL pop-up activations for brands like Shopify, Rent the Runway, T-Mobile, a bunch of big brands, and I've been to well over 100 college campuses in my life, which is so wild.
Oh my goodness. Wait, where did
Yeah.
you go?
I went to Syracuse in
I have so
upstate New
many
York.
questions. Keep going.
And through that, ran that business all throughout college and beyond, and then spent some time at Spotify and Snapchat while in school too as an intern and just learned a ton about consumer tech, consumer brands, selling an audience. And we started Home from College really in 2022. And that's kind of the crazy timeline.
Unreal. Okay. Did you visit all of these college campuses before you chose to go to Syracuse or whilst you were building your prior business?
While I was building my prior business. So we would essentially negotiate contracts with college campuses to show up on campus. And the whole premise of the business was basically to create educational adjacent brand experiences. So with Shopify, we would build an activation geared towards helping students start a business. So that it allowed us to jump through a bunch of loopholes where brands typically can't get on campus, or a lot of red tape, and learned a ton about the infrastructures of universities, the politics, all of that jazz.
What was the impetus? Were you always entrepreneurial from a young age and you got to school and realized there's just a huge opportunity? Or I did not spend
Well,
my college years doing this. Like, explain it to me.
it's funny. I grew up with a learning disability, so I think from a young age knew that there was more than one way to do things in the world, and that was both a challenge at a young age, but a gift that I've really learned to harness. And I was in this really amazing program in high school where I was able to intern for most of my classwork, and it's
Whoa.
called the alternative school, and I credit a lot of my early confidence and success to that. But I lived in New York, and I would intern. I had like 7 or 8 internships before I graduated high school,
Oh my goodness.
which is wild and it was very informative of what I liked, what I didn't like. That's what really drove me to go to Newhouse, which is a communication school at Newhouse at Syracuse. And through that, I realized I'm now in college for this, 4-year period of time, isolated from major markets. I want to be getting real world experience to supplement what I'm learning in the classroom, but like, numerically 90% of students graduate without ever having an internship. And I realized, yeah, it's absolutely
That's
insane.
terrifying.
So you think about that, and you realize what internships mean to you, and it's informative, you make money, you build your resume. But realizing that that wasn't that accessible was a really big inspiration for building both my first company, Wave, and Home from College.
Okay, so where is Wave today? And then how did you pivot from that to Home from College?
Wave is no longer in existence. We wound it down and sold a lot of those permits that we had with the schools, essentially to build something more scalable. A lot of these activations were multi-million dollars for just a couple of days, and it was highly unscalable to really make the impact we were hoping for, because so many students would come and say, amazing, I know, Shopify wants me to start a business, but can I work at Shopify? And it ignited this realization that if we could give access to students, this type of brand knowledge and value prop, but through a tech platform, that there could be a lot of value in that.
Okay, so will you walk us through the beginning stages of you knew you wanted to start this? How thrifty did you have to be in the beginning? When did you raise? Like, give us the original breakdown.
Prior to Home from College, when we were kind of in between figuring out what the next iteration of this concept was going to be that would be a little bit more scalable, my co-founder and I were workshopping a couple of different ideas, and we had a concept in mind that we had raised some early friends and family capital around, and it was a physical manifestation. It had very like capital intensive business, that would definitely not be possible in a COVID world, which this happened to be in March 2020. And we were able to really quickly pivot. And I called my co-founder up one day and I said, what if we bought the domain homefromcollege.com? Every student just went home from college in COVID. It's March 2020. And he was like, let's do it. We spent almost 10 grand on a domain that we had no idea, threw up a landing page. And I had quite a large network of college students and college influencers. And we said, hey, we don't know what this is going to be yet, but this is going to be a career platform oriented to help you find success in your career. And we had over 10,000 people sign up for the landing page within like a 2-week period, which was insane with no concept.
My goodness.
Yeah, and then from there we did about a year's worth of product testing and feedback and research to understand what are we building, what's the need, how can we be thoughtful about this. And really in 2022 we raised a little bit more substantial capital from strategics and angels, and that helped us bring our first iteration of the product to market really in 2023, and then scaled a ton in 2024 and raised from Google Ventures in the end of 2024, and now here we are in 2025.
Crazy. Do you mind digging in a little bit how you and your co-founder know each other?
Yes, for sure. So actually when we were raising money for the concept for the early business that didn't come to life because of COVID, my family friend introduced me to a friend of hers who worked in finance and venture, and he ended up grilling me on the phone to secure her angel investment in our business. And he ended up being really passionate about what we were working on and had really amazing operational experience. I'm very much the creative innovator founder persona, and he's an ops finance wizard. And we ended up realizing that we have an amazing professional partnership, and we consulted together for about 6 months before realizing that we'd be great co-founders. And then through that period of time, ended up falling in love. And we were in a relationship then, and then we got married last year. So.
Oh my goodness, Mazel Tov. I'm like semi-pretending that I didn't know the end of that story, but I did. But I didn't know that full story. That's amazing. Is he from New York also?
So he's actually European. He's Dutch, but he has been in the U.S. since college, and his family lives in the New York area now. Yeah.
Okay, so he moved out here for the business / for you, low key.
Yeah, we moved together.
Oh.
We moved here in 2021 in LA in 2021, but we were working in our parents' basements basically in 2020, 2021, and then moved out to LA in 2021, and then everything blew up from there.
What was the impetus for the move from New York to LA?
You know, I would want to tell you there's a little bit more strategy here, but it was one of those COVID moves where it was looking for something new. We had both had experiences in New York and realized that we really appreciated the quality of life and wanting a little bit of balance, knowing that startup world is super crazy. And we moved here in 2021 with the intention to leave 6 months later. We had a lease signed in Tribeca in New York, and we ended up staying. We've been in our home that we've been in since 2021 and are absolutely never leaving. So.
Oh man, well good. I can't have you leaving LA. Every time someone tells me they're leaving LA, I get very upset.
I don't know why anyone would ever leave, but everyone told me you'll last like 18 months and then you'll come back to New York. So I have proven that wrong.
Yeah, we love that. More of that. Yeah. Okay, will you tell me some of the earliest brand partnerships that made you feel like, wait, this is really working and we need to keep going?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we really started early on, the thesis and the core use case of Home from College still today is called the gig, which we call it GAS, Gen Z Access as a Service. And companies come on and create gig opportunities, flexible opportunities that could be content creation, brand ambassador programs, growth marketing initiatives, intern work, all through our rails. And that was always our thesis: give students paid opportunities with brands they love, give brands access to an audience that they're trying to hire or acquire. And it really was a win-win-win all around. Through that, we built the tech mechanism. Some of the early brands we had on, we worked with IAT, which is the Holdco that owned like Match Group and all of these brands. They were some of our really early partners. Then we worked with Beyond Meat as one of our big enterprise brands. But the really, fulfilling part is that we work with hundreds and hundreds of brands at scale through our platform. So though we work with Neutrogena and Aquaphor and large tech companies like Etsy and Linktree, it's some of the small businesses that use our platform that is most inspiring because they get so much value out of the help and motivation of the young students.
Can you give, for those people that aren't super familiar with Home from College, some of like examples of what those gigs could look like?
Definitely. A lot of brands will sequence gigs together for business use cases. So, a good example is Beyond Meat, just from an OG use case as we're talking about them. They were launching a new product innovation and wanted a brand ambassador program to basically have trial and acquisition of the new product. So, there was, I think, over 60 ambassadors across a number of different markets that would generate sampling opportunities, create content, spread the word, shared promos, drive to retail. And then they had an in-store retail sampling program where they actually had like field ambassadors in different retail markets all over the US. And then from there, we had a content creator program. So it was hire influencer like college students who created content for paid. And then they actually ended up hiring a number of those students as interns for the summer. So it was a very multi-use case example,
Cool.
but a lot of brands take that similar approach.
I want to dig into, you're going to make fun of me, but being an elder millennial, I don't even know that I qualify as an elder millennial or if I just act like an old woman, but I want to dig into like your expertise on Gen Z for everyone. So I will admit this here. I have been asking Julie if I could intern for her for probably over a year now, just so that I can
It's always
understand.
fun for you.
I really want to do this, but I want to understand a little bit of creator economy and what it's like being a full-time student, also a creator, and then also just understanding Gen Z mentality and what that looks like in the workforce.
100%. And I would say it's a humongous cultural shift. That was a big inspiration and wave that we like really got on, that we saw happening in the light of COVID. So I think one of the big things that initiated this independent monetizer community of, side hustlers that are Gen Z is that work became more accessible to do remotely. And, over 6 years ago, you couldn't really work remotely or intern remotely. So I think that the timing of this business as it relates to the trends that it associates with Gen Z in terms of wanting to do multiple things, being a side hustler, being a multi-hyphenate, wanting to make money in a number of ways is very in line with that. I think 85% of this next generation sees themselves as having multiple streams of income. So whether that is content creation or side hustling, doing graphic design or being a copywriter or being a software engineer, there's this desire to do more than what your 9 to 5 is.
Yeah.
And potentially not even having a 9 to 5. So there are a lot of things to think about as it relates to hiring young professionals, but also knowing that they come with a desire to be financially independent earlier because they've lived through a lot of trauma between 9/11 and COVID and all of these things, that it's deeply rooted in who they are in their, age range.
It's super interesting because I have fought this, I guess, old school conservative mentality of growing up. My dad had one career his whole life and he's incredibly successful. I aspire to be him in almost every way, but that's what my role model was. And so when I first became a young working woman, I started at UBS as an intern. And when I wrote out my vision and goals, I wanted to be a 65-year-old woman still working on the trading floor at UBS. And so much of my self-judgment comes from the fact that I really did love that, but I wanted more. And now when I look at my life, I have a portfolio of careers. And I do think there is self-judgment and diversity from societal norm for my generation or my age group of having that, of owning yoga studios, of having wellness growth ventures, of also having a podcast, of all the variety of things. And so it's, for me, validating and heartwarming in a way to see the younger generation being like, no, this makes so much sense and it's so fulfilling and it's okay and it's sustainable and all the things. So I love hearing that.
It's interesting you say that because there is definitely always a generational conflict that arises when there are shifts in the way that people see the world, obviously within Gen Z, millennial, boomer, etc. It's interesting to observe because Gen Zers have typically multiple jobs before they're 26, even full-time careers. And it would not be uncommon to look at someone who's 26, we call them quarter life crisisers, resumes, and they've only worked somewhere for 1 year. And that has been historically a negative signal for hiring managers to say, wow, you've jumped around a lot. But I think culturally, it's something that Gen Z aspires to do. And the aspiration to stay for 5, 6 years somewhere commonly is seen as boring and non-challenging their motives.
I talk about this a lot. My father's generation, when they were working, they also had some sort of retirement plan within the company. So they were incentivized to stay at the company, but that doesn't exist anymore. So when there was judgment from hiring managers for my generation, at least, I was like, but the same structure doesn't exist anymore. So it doesn't even make sense from a financial aspect, especially when really to make a different bracket of income, you have to change companies, not just get a promotion oftentimes.
Definitely. And I think the incentives that companies are implementing now are more short term for quality of life rather than long term for, value system. We joke about should we get everyone an Erewhon membership who joins home from college? But that's the kind of alignment that we see resonates with the next generation. Is giving me value in my today, and my tomorrow could be very different. So I'm going to continue to assess that and not think long term about those choices.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you think that that will impact college and what going to college or what you learn in college or what you do in college will look like in 5, 10 years?
It's interesting because I do not believe that college is going to lose momentum. I think people really want to go to college for what it represents in the phase of their life. And I think that it's very challenging to replicate that independence, that going away experience, that Gen Zers experience when they go. So for that reason, I believe that there will constantly be a desire to go to college. As it continues to get less accessible, and that actually 90% of students are on financial aid, you think about, wow, am I going to be in debt for the duration of my life for this purpose? I think that's continued to call into question. What I believe is that people are going to find multiple ways to supplement their income while in college rather than just being a work study student or someone who has a job in the school. I think that people are going to look for multiple identities and streams of income to support the choice of going to college. I believe that it will exist. I think people will choose to go. I think the universities will continue to struggle to stay relevant around the fast-paced world, just given the bureaucracy of what universities are. But I think it will exist. We'll see if there's going to be a breaking point in terms of the cost, because I don't know what the average cost of an institution is today annually, but I know it's well over like $80,000 on average for private institutions.
I guess that what do hiring managers, what do large companies, what do even small companies need to know about who they're hiring then to either serve them and also serve their companies more in terms of skill set, what they're looking for, building long-term leaders, etc.?
I think there's two buckets of people who are hiring today, those that we call Gen Z haters and those who are Gen Z advocates. And then there's people, of course, somewhere in the middle. The Gen Z haters, and we see them, and it's totally reasonable to feel frustrated and feel that Gen Z doesn't have the work ethic, or that they want to set boundaries, or they don't want to go into the office, and thinking about being critical of how that workforce sees what their professional life is. Many of them do see it as one part of who they are. There is another subset of people who say, wow, you are so deeply proficient in AI and you're all of the tools that are coming up, and you are positioning yourself as a multi-hyphenate. So maybe we've done, traditional PR in this way, but you just wrote a press release in 10 seconds and came up with a whole marketing strategy in a week that we would have used 4 agencies for. Thank you for being so efficient. So it really depends on the person who's hiring, but I would challenge those who are hiring for this next generation to really consider that if fostered properly, this audience can be a true Swiss Army knife, because they have a desire and a willingness to take in information and act upon it.
I guess not to push too hard, but when I'm thinking about some of the larger institutions where they're archaic in a lot of ways, although they desire innovation. And so much of it will depend on their willingness to make some changes. But how do you see, especially with so many of these big tech companies, finance companies saying 5 days a week in office, will they lose out on some of the good talent? Or what are some things, tangible things they can say, all right, we can compromise here in order to get this talent or to use the Swiss Army knife?
I think actually we've seen from our own experience in the companies we work with, the desire to be in office is very much there from Gen Z. Because many of them have lived in an isolated format throughout periods of their time and in-person connection is meaningful. If I was a company, a corporate company, I would not negotiate on that, especially because absorbing what's in the environment is what's going to help them be successful and give you the opportunity to identify people who have potential more because they're sitting next to you. So if I was a corporate company, I would not negotiate with that. I would create programs that give room for this talent pool to contribute outside of their obvious job description. Because if you are an entry-level analyst and you have a very regimented work life that you are working a million hours to something that makes you feel less important because there is a hierarchy, creating innovation teams or hackathons or the ability to shadow in other organizations would be really valuable to help retain talent for longer periods of time.
You say it so, again, it sounds so rational, so reasonable. I'm like, why is no one like why aren't more people doing this? This is such a brilliant
It's crazy because those teams actually tend to get cut because it requires people to do things outside of their traditional job description. And frequently in larger corporate companies, people are very specific about how their specific job description will improve their chances of getting promoted. So I don't want to generalize, but I think those teams are typically within HR, and HR tends to have other big problems that they have to deal with. So I would love for that, and I hope that that's a next shift, but I think the jury's out on it.
enough. If you were building home from college from scratch today, is there anything you do differently?
We've made some really important early choices that I very much stand by. One being that we wanted to be a revenue generating business from the beginning, prior to really raising capital. Two, really understanding what our product market fit was before raising a ton of money. When we started, there was a number of companies kind of in our space that came up all at the same time, and they raised capital very early before they clearly had product market fit. Adjacently in our space, different iterations of the theme, none of those businesses exist today. So I think there's something to be said around that. Not saying it's the best approach, but we were really methodical in that front. I would say continuing to host Gen Z advisory panels, product testing focus groups was a core pillar both on our company side and on the student facing side of our business. Maybe something that I would try and look for earlier if I was building a tech business again would be someone who could be more technically involved earlier, because there was a lot of decisions that we made for V1 that we had to scrap for V2 because we didn't have a senior technical leader in when we were ideating the concept. That's obviously challenging to find someone who gets your vision, and if you're not paying them well yet, because you can't, to motivate them. But I would say really pushing ourselves to expand our network technically earlier so that we could run some business decisions and product decisions by someone who could give some feedback on.
Love that. This is a pointed one, but not in a bad way, because I think I know the answer. But if you weren't building home from college, what would you be doing?
Definitely building something else. I think that I would not thrive in corporate America, or honestly, really working for someone else. I think that I probably will have the ability or create an ability to do my own thing in some capacity for the long term. I think they would want to fire me, honestly. I think I don't do well in the construct of people telling me what to do in that format, but hopefully I could be a little bit more adaptable. Who knows?
I have the utmost faith in you. What's your favorite Gen Z trend? Sorry, I'm going so rogue.
No, I love it. Let me think. I think this people hate this, but I think it's hilarious when Gen Zers use Gen Z like lingo in totally inappropriate settings. We are hiring for a role, and I posted about it on TikTok, and we got like over 1,000 applicants from that TikTok, which is insane. And I was reading through, I made a vow to like actually click through every application just to learn about how is Gen Z presenting themselves? What do their resumes look like? And there was a number of, hey babe, just wanted to share through my resume, like hope you love, like heart hand emoji energy. And I'm like, this is hilarious. Totally not acceptable in a professional format, but I think it's hilarious that Gen Z thinks that's okay. And that is something I'm seeing a lot within like not knowing the professionalism boundaries, but I'm hoping it makes our world more casual. So, because I'm like following up per our last email also makes me a little nauseous. So I'm somewhere in the middle.
It's really funny because I have a few friends who will cross over from my like wellness yoga side of the world into my more like finance world. And depending on which email I send it from, they're like, you're two fully different people. It's either, hi, circling back, or like,
Yes.
hi, honey, how are you? It's so good to see you.
So funny.
I would love one identity. So I guess I value that.
Yeah, which identity would you choose if you had to choose one?
So this is like a 2025 goal of mine. I want one identity and I'm trying to figure out how to navigate the world as one because I am not one or the other. I have always been both. And I think that's part of why I've struggled being solely in one or solely in the other. I'm either like the hippie on the trading floor or I'm this finance bro. And like I'm just neither really.
But that's what makes you so special because most people are one or the other and they don't have the ability to be both. So I think
Thank
that's
you. Very
your
generous.
secret.
That's what I'm working on, believing that. Will you dig a little bit more into social media and TikTok because you've thrived? You are she's like just really cool. For those of you that aren't on TikTok, she's just cool on TikTok. Will you tell us how that strategy came to be, how you navigate it, how you feel confident, and like what your thoughts are all of it?
So when we started thinking about what should my TikTok strategy be or think about how I show up on TikTok, it's funny because I don't at all call myself a creator. I think of using that platform as a mechanism to connect and share the work we're doing in home from college. For me, it's a fascinating outlet because I am so opinionated about some things as it relates to career and professionalism, and some things that I perceive as very baseline, like sending a thank you letter after an interview, or how to actually answer type of interview questions. But I think what it has associated with our business is a level of resource around helping young people in their career or middle tier people navigate the landscape. But it's so fun for me, and I do all these exercises that, whether I talk about interview questions or controversial takes on career, that make people flip out and cancel me in the comments. And I think it's hilarious. I get a ton of hate comments. Just more along the lines of people who have opinions about, for example, not sending a thank you note or feeling things that are not a personal attack to me. But yeah, I love using the platform as a way to connect with people at scale.
Sometimes I get hate comments. It just helps my algorithm. I don't know that people understand that like hate on me. As long as you're like commenting, saving, sharing, whatever it is, hate on me all you want because you are just helping. I don't understand the logic behind it.
I love it. I love what people grab onto for the algorithm boosting purposes of that. I think it's fabulous. But I also think that people grab onto like specific nuances, like you were just mentioning something in the beginning of this interview that people, comment on, and it's like, why would you even comment on that? But it's so reflective of their own current state that it's interesting that there is also like cult-like mentality around specific things that trigger people. Like, why would, saying one thing versus the other really get everyone up in arms? Interesting psychological experiment. Maybe dig into it and see if people flip out more. Like, I think that's fascinating.
What's one piece of advice that you would give to women who want to build something probably within tech, but generally maybe in the creator economy or in Gen Z economy? Yeah.
A piece of advice I would really give to women wanting to build something would be around creating a support system that you trust and value. One of my favorite parts of building home from college is having people around me that are either a little bit further along, a little bit further behind, and then people who are big reach network people. And it's fascinating to have that community. What I learned really early on is that if you take everyone's opinion for fact, you will drive yourself crazy, because investors will tell you that's a bad idea, or peers will tell you that didn't work before. And that can really rock your sense of center and purpose. So work on that first, and then build your support system around you to supplement the areas that you feel less confident in, but you really trust their opinions. And I think that's one of the superpowers of women that you should definitely try and harness.
That was a hit home hard response.
I feel that though, because I was just having coffee with someone who works for a male young founder who very much is in his own echo chamber. And it's very hard for this woman who has a totally different persona of bringing people around her who wants to continue to grow, and realize that it actually may be a gender thing, that women are really good at that, and looking for partners in your community is something nice to have.
I love that. Okay, well, we end each week with 5 final questions that are like one-word answers. Rarely do people use one word, but we can totally try for it. What is something you can't live without?
Coffee in the morning.
Ooh, how do you take yours?
This is where the New York type A is still in black iced coffee or black hot coffee. I know that's like serial killer status, but
yeah. Wow, I aspire. What keeps you grounded?
being outside really keeps me grounded. I love to be outside.
Who do you admire most?
My grandmother. She is 97 years old. She was one of the first women to go to her college in New York ever. She is a psychotherapist and was practicing up until last year, seeing clients. And she is an amazing rock, and so inspiring from a generation, but also from, her sense of self and confidence. And I love that about her.
We're obsessed with her.
She's amazing.
What makes you feel wealthy?
Community. People around me who align and can see the future in the same way.
So many of the incredible founders we've had on here have all said that. That's just
Really?
Mm-hmm. And what's something few people know about you?
I grew up a classically trained opera singer, which is like always my good fun fact. I wanted to be like a normal, I sing Selena Gomez at age 12, and my parents enrolled me in this classical opera school, and I took singing lessons there.
Dad, do you still sing?
Like in the shower for fun, but definitely not anymore.
I don't think everyone in book club knows this. We might need I don't know, what's everyone good at? Everyone does a little talent show type moment.
I love it. In college, I used to rip into a note in the elevator just for fun, because people would hear it through the floors, because all my friends in college would have me do that too. So maybe we do a little talent show.
I would love this. This has been so fun. I'm low-key obsessed with you, which you definitely know. But I've loved digging into this with you. And you're helping so many people, which is just a really cool thing to do while also building an incredibly successful tech.
Thank you. And I'm so inspired by you and your multi-hyphenate and the hippie girl on the trading floor. So thank you for having me.
I can't wait to see you at next book club. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week.